Good morning, everybody. It's good to see y'all here today. We're going to be doing a story today from John chapter 11. So if you'll all just turn to John chapter 11, we'll get started. Now, I read a few verses in John chapter 10 before we started the lesson. And the reason I read those is because I want you to get into your understanding what chapter 11 is really all about. In the last two chapters before chapter 11, Jesus keeps telling these people who He is, right? And that if they will believe on Him, then everything will be fine, right? He keeps doing things and saying things so that people will believe that He is who He says He is. Because at this time, in this dispensation that they were living in, there were a whole bunch of requirements when it came to their salvation. The last requirement was that they believed that Jesus was the Son of God, that He was the Messiah that was sent by the Father to save the children of Israel, to restore the kingdom, right, of Israel, right? So He's trying to convince these people that He is who He says He is. Now, right before this, He had been in Jerusalem during the winter, and He was at the Feast of Dedication. And during that time, they asked Him, will you quit messing around and tell us once and for all, are you the Son of God? Are you the Messiah? Right? And He said, well, I've told you that I am. I've told you many times that I am. And if you don't believe me, then you're probably just not one of my children, you know? Well, what they did was they picked up stones and tried to stone Him. And He said, what are you stoning me for? He said, why are you stoning? Why are you wanting to stone me? I've done all these miracles and signs and wonders. You know, which of these great signs that I have done, these great works that I have done, for which of these do you stone me? And they said, we're not stoning you because of your good works. We like those. We like being healed. You know what I mean? We like all the stuff that you're doing, but they just could not believe that He was who He says He was. Even though the Old Testament tells them all the way through that He was going to come and that He was going to do these very signs and wonders that they're seeing Him do. Right? So God had already told them in the Old Testament that this was coming. That when the Messiah comes, He's going to do all these great works. That He's going to do these miracles. That He's going to do these signs and wonders. And it even says that He was going to do these specific ones. But they just refused to believe that He was the Son of God. You know, we face this today with the doctrine that we teach. Right division and dispensational theology. There's a lot of people that just refuse to believe it. Because they've been raised up with something their whole lives. They believe something else their whole lives, right? And when they're faced with the truth, there's two kinds of people. When they're faced with the truth, they either see the truth and embrace it, or they reject it and call the people who are telling them the truth crazy. Okay? Now, this isn't just in religion. It happens in all walks of life. But especially in Christianity. You see it all the time. I was listening to a guy yesterday. I didn't listen to him for very long. And the name of his show is Grace and Truth. Okay? The guy neither teaches grace nor truth. Now, he knows the Bible. Let me tell you, he knows the Bible. He gets him a whiteboard up there, you know. And he writes, everything he says, he writes down. Every Bible verse that he quotes, he writes down. He never opens the Bible and says, you know, and reads the actual verse. But he'll write it down on the board and he'll quote it. You know what I mean? And, boy, he sounds smart. He sounds like he really knows what he's talking about. He sounds like somebody who has studied the Bible intently his entire life. He looks like a college professor up there with his little glasses and everything. Although I wear glasses too, don't I? I'm not trying to look like no college professor. Now, she apologized for that she might fall asleep. She didn't apologize that the phone might ring, but that's okay. Don't you worry about it. If I didn't hear a phone ring from time to time, I'd wonder if y'all still alive. It's okay. Not by works which we have done, right? But anyway, we see this every day, especially us. People who teach right division and dispensational theology, we see this all the time. People refuse to acknowledge the truth. You know what I mean? Even though it's right in front of them. Amen. I'm so glad that I'm not one of those people. Right? I'm not saying that I'm special or anything like that. God chose me to teach the truth. When I got saved, I didn't ask for God to. When I prayed to Jesus, when I was at my lowest point in my life, I didn't pray that Jesus would save me. I prayed that Jesus would reveal the truth to me. Now, once I saw the truth, I got saved. It wasn't hard to do. You know what I mean? But He has revealed the truth to me. Slowly and over time, but He has revealed the truth to me, and I recognize the truth. And I think it's because that's what I prayed for. All right? There's a lot of people out there that don't care about the truth. Amen. They care about what they believe. I believe this, and I expect this to confirm what I believe. It don't work that way, guys. The Jews were the same way at this time. They believed what the Pharisees were teaching. All right? They refused to see the truth even though it was right in front of them. So Jesus is going to give them one more chance before He goes to the cross to show these people what the truth really was, to put it right in front of their face so that they couldn't deny what had happened. Okay? Now, chapter 11, verse 1 says, Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus, of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, Bethany was a small little community just outside of Jerusalem. It was, as a matter of fact, if you're in Jerusalem and you go up onto the Mount of Olives, where Jesus went to pray just before He was captured and taken prisoner, if you go on over the mountain, the Mount of Olives, and down into the valley, that's where Bethany is, right? It's probably an hour, 45-minute walk from Jerusalem itself, all right? It's kind of a suburb. It's kind of like the Brentwood of Jerusalem, right? It's kind of a suburb. And this is where Lazarus and Martha and Mary lived. Martha and Mary were His sisters. Now, Lazarus and Martha and Mary were very good friends with Jesus. As a matter of fact, Jesus went to Jerusalem. A lot of people don't realize this because they don't look close enough. And they watch movies, and these movies show Jesus going to Jerusalem maybe 2, maybe 3 times, the whole time that He's during His ministry. But what you have to understand is Jesus was in Jerusalem at least 7 times a year from the time He was 11 years old. 7 times a year He went to Jerusalem. Why? Because there were feast days 7 times a year, and every Jewish man was required to be at those feast days. Okay, now, so remember this as we go forward. So Jesus was in Jerusalem 7 times, at least 7 times a year. All right? Each time He made the Pharisees mad, and they wanted to do something about Him. But He was there 7 times. And the time that He went before was the time I was telling you about, where they tried to stone Him. And then after they tried to stone Him, He said a few more things, and then they tried to capture Him, and He kind of slipped out of town. And what He did was He went down to the Jordan River, went on the other side of the Jordan River, and while He was there, He taught the disciples. He told them that he was going to be taken by men, crucified, that he would be buried and rise again the third day. He told them this. They had no idea what he was talking about. They didn't understand it at all, right? Everybody who actually trusted in Jesus, even though he told them that he had to die and be resurrected, none of them understood it at all. They were just expecting him at any time when he felt the moment was right to set his kingdom up and to reign over Jerusalem as king. Okay? They were expecting him to do that at any time. All the people who trusted in Jesus. The people who didn't trust in Jesus just thought he was a flake and crazy. Okay? Anybody who said that he was the Son of God, all right, was blasphemous and had no business even around them. All right. So Bethany was that small town. Jesus had been to their house many times. As a matter of fact, there's a story where Martha and Mary, Jesus had come to their house. Mary was on her knees in front of Jesus, washing his feet and drying them with her hair. And Martha was running around all over the place because Jesus was there, making sure everything was taken care of, making sure, there was at least, you got to figure, when Jesus comes to town, when Jesus comes to your house, he's bringing 12 disciples with him, at least 12 disciples with him. It's believed that at this time, we know other people traveled with him too. Mary Magdalene traveled with him, right? At this time, his mother may have been actually traveling with him as well, because she was at the crucifixion, right? So she was there. But anyway, Martha was running around trying to get everything fixed up, and Mary was at the feet of Jesus learning. Okay? Now this is a good lesson for us. There's always two kinds of people, right? Some people are about the work. I'm saved now. I know all I need to know. Let's get about the work, right? And some people are like, the work will wait. I'm going to sit here at Jesus' feet and listen to him. Now Jesus, Martha asked that Jesus get on to Mary and get her to get up and help him, right? And Jesus said, no, I'm not going to do that, because Mary is here at my feet listening to the teaching and coming to the knowledge of the truth through my words. I'm not going to tell her to get up and be about the work. The work is important, people. It is important, okay? But we need to be about knowing the Word. When you have an opportunity, this is what Jesus was saying to Martha and Mary at this time. If you have an opportunity to sit and learn from a teacher, that's what you should do at that moment. There's going to be plenty of time in your life to do the work. But if you have an opportunity to sit under a teacher, do it. All right? That's what Sundays and Wednesdays here are all about. That's what the conferences are all about. Okay? Don't worry about what you have to do. When you have an opportunity to learn, to study, to show yourself approved, that's what you need to be doing. Jesus made that very clear. Okay? There's plenty of time for the work. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. Let's keep going. So these people lived in Bethany. They were very good friends of his. It was that Mary, which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So it explains who this was, right? Therefore his sister sent unto Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. So he obviously had a very good relationship with Lazarus, right? His sisters knew that Jesus loved their brother Lazarus, right? When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. So Jesus knew exactly what was going on, didn't he? He knew this was going to happen. He knew what was going on the whole time. He understood that this whole scenario, this whole story that we're going to read here, was a way to glorify Him, to reveal Him as the Messiah, to reveal Him as the Son of God. And through that, He would be glorified. And through the glorification of Jesus, God the Father is glorified. Okay? So He knew that this whole situation that was going to play out was for His glory. All right? He goes on and said, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So He did love these people. I mean, he had a close relationship, like we do, We love each other. We take care of each other, right? Jesus had the same type of love. It's called phileo in the Greek, which means brotherly love. That's why they named Philadelphia. Philadelphia's named City of Brotherly Love. Anyway, verse 6, when He had heard, therefore, that he was sick, He abode 2 days still in the same place where He was. Then after that, saith He to His disciples, let us go into Judea again. Now, Jesus loved these people, right? He loved Lazarus, He loved Martha, He loved Mary. He loved these people dearly. You would think He would just drop everything and go to them, wouldn't you? With that brother being sick, almost to death. Okay? But that's not what He did. He waited 2 days. He waited 2 days before He did anything. Right? Sometimes we need to just sit and wait, don't we? We're always so busy about doing the work that sometimes we need to just relax a few minutes. All right? Get guidance from God. Understand the best way to proceed before we proceed. It's kind of like you hear people say all the time, think before you speak. Sometimes you need to pray before you work. All right? So He stayed 2 days. Now He did this to make sure, for one thing, that Lazarus was dead when He got there. All right? Now that sounds kind of cruel, but like we said, the whole scenario here is going to glorify God, right? And then He said, let us go to Judea, because it's Bethany is in Judea, right? Just east of Jerusalem. Verse 8, His disciples say unto Him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone Thee, and goest Thou thither again? Now, the last time He was in Jerusalem, they tried to stone Him. And then they tried to capture Him, because He said, I am the Son of God. So His disciples are worried. They don't want to go, right? They don't want to go, because they know that the Pharisees there are going to try and the religious zealots there are going to try and kill Him again, because He's telling them who He is, right? They know He's going to try. Now, one thing that these disciples don't understand is the Feast of Passover is coming, right? Jesus had to be in Jerusalem for the Feast of the Passover. Had nothing to do with Him going there to die for the sins of mankind. He was a Jewish man who kept the law. And part of the law was, you are in Jerusalem for the Passover. It's the law. Guess what? Jesus never disobeyed the law. He kept the law perfectly. Jesus was going to Judea. It didn't matter whether Lazarus was sick or dead or anything. He was going for the Passover. He was going to pass through Bethany on His way. But His goal was to be there for the Passover. And because He knew that it was His time was coming. All right? Now, His disciples said unto Him, they were like, we don't want you to go. We don't want you to go, because they're liable to kill you when you go. Let me tell you something about the law. The law doesn't say you must be in Jerusalem for every feast day unless something comes up. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say you must be in Jerusalem for the feast days, even as long as everything is cool in Jerusalem. It doesn't say that. It says you will be in Jerusalem on the feast day. All right? The feast day was coming. Jesus had no choice. But the disciples, see, they're like us. If it's not convenient to come to church, we might not come today. You understand what I'm saying? If the football game, we used to have somebody that came to church here, except during football season. As soon as the NFL started, you didn't see that man on Sunday. You know what I mean? You just didn't see him. As soon as the football season was over, you'd see him again. You know what I mean? But this is what happens to us. If there's a good reason not to go, then we don't go. You know what I mean? If we can think of a reason, or if something comes up on Sundays, you know what I mean? Well, I won't go to church today. This is going on, and this is going on, and I've got to do this and that. Same thing on Wednesday nights. We teach on Wednesday nights for an hour just like we do here on Sunday mornings. It's a different part of the Bible, but we're teaching, right? I do a lesson every Wednesday night, don't I, Miss Sandy? Right? There's a lot of reasons not to come on Wednesday night. 7 o'clock's about supper time. You know? Big Brother might be on. Just kidding. You understand what I'm saying? There's things going on Wednesday night. You can't always get here. But Jesus made keeping the law a priority, right? He made what God had asked him to do a priority. All right? And that was his priority. That's what he was going to do. Everything else was put aside. Okay? You have to know what your priorities are. What are your priorities? Okay? Is your priority studying to show yourself approved? Or is your priority watching a football game? Okay? Jesus' priority was doing what God had told him to do. What does God tell us to do? He tells us, study to show yourself approved. If you have time. Now, he doesn't say that, does he? No. If you don't have anything else to do, study to show yourself approved. No, that's not what God says. He says, study to show yourself approved. Everything else will take care of itself. Okay? There's always going to be things to do. I wonder some days, a lot of y'all know how Robbie is. It's about the work, isn't it? Now, because she's here every Sunday and every Wednesday to study also. But it's about the work, isn't it? I often wonder who's going to do everything when Robbie's gone. There's going to be so much work left undone when Robbie's not here. Right? I don't know how it's all going to get done. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be busy. Anyway. Verse 9. Jesus answered, there are not 12 hours in the day. If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things he said. And after that he said unto them, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Now, this thing about the light, it confused me for years. It was like, what in the world is he talking about? I'll tell you what he's talking about. He's talking about as long as you are doing what God has asked you to do, especially during this time, all right? As long as Jesus was doing what God had asked him to do, nothing bad was going to happen to him. Okay? Not until it was time for something to happen to him. Okay? That's all he's saying here. As a matter of fact, there's a place in the law that says when you go to these 7 feast days that I have appointed for you, that I will make sure that your stuff here at home is taken care of and that nothing happens to it. till you get back from the feast day. All right? So God is in the business of taking care of things for you while you're doing His will. As long as you're doing His will, He takes care of things for you. He makes sure that everything's okay at home. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that you won't go home and find a pipe busted in your hot water heater. You got water all over everywhere. That's in this day, during this dispensation, it did mean that. It really did. Jesus said, God said, I will make sure nothing happens to your stuff while you're gone. All right? He meant it. Now today, we don't have that same promise.
Amen.
Okay? We have the promise that the world is going to hate us and that things are going to go wrong, and just remain faithful because I've already given you everything.
Amen.
All right? That's the promise we have. Things are going to go wrong. It's a sinful world. It's an ugly place. Things are just going to get worse. But you've been reconciled to God, and I'd like it. I'd appreciate it if you'd share that reconciliation with other people.
Amen.
That's our only promise. And when you're done, there's a place for you, and there's a face that you'll know when you get there. You know what I mean? But anyway, so he's saying, as long as I'm doing God's will, I'll be fine. And he knew what God's will was, and that was to raise Lazarus from the dead, to glorify Him and His Father. He goes on to say, he says in verse 11, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. When he said sleep, they thought he meant he was taking a nap and that he was recovering from his sickness. Howbeit, verse 13, Jesus spake of his death. A lot of times in the Gospels and in the rest of the New Testament, when sleep is mentioned, it means death. Okay? Then howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking a rest in sleep. Then Jesus said unto them, let me make it plainly, Lazarus is dead. Okay? And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, for the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. So this thing is all planned out, right? He's doing all of this, and he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead to prove to everybody there, and even to his disciples, I am who I say I am. Isn't it funny that Jesus' whole purpose on this earth, when he was here, was to convince people that I am who I say I am, right? That was his purpose while he was here on earth. He had to convince people that he was. When Moses was on the mountain getting the 10 Commandments, he asked God, what's your name? Because the people are going to ask me, if I talk to you, what's his name? And you know what he said? I am that I am. And now he's trying to convince these same Jews that I am who I say I am. I am is such a powerful word. It is believed that when the soldiers came to arrest him, I think it's mentioned here in the Bible, when the soldiers came to arrest him, they said they were looking for Jesus, and he said, I am he. And when he said, I am, they all fell backwards from the power of it.
Amen.
Anytime you see I am in the Bible, it's very important, because it's the name of God. Right? So he's going there to do something that will increase their faith. Okay? Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus. Now Didymus only means twin. Thomas was a twin. All right? Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Now this is a great statement of faith, isn't it? If Jesus, if you're going to go, and there's a chance that you're going to get killed when you go there, we should go with you and die with you. Stand with you and die right along with you. Right? Great statement of faith. Especially for somebody who said, I will not believe unless I stick my fingers in the scars of his hands. And stick my hand in his side where they shoved that spear. Said, I'm not going to believe unless I can see it and touch it. The same guy. Isn't that wild? But a great statement of faith. Verse 17, then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. All right? So evidently, Jesus left after he got the news. He left 2 days later. I have a feeling that it probably took him a day or so just to find Jesus. Lazarus probably died right after the messengers left to go find him. Okay? By the time Jesus got there, he'd been in the grave or been in his tomb for 4 days. Now we all know what a 4-day-old body is like. We may not have ever actually been there, but we know that it's not a pleasant thing, right? So he'd been dead for 4 days already. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem. In other words, it was near. About 15 furlongs off. Not very far at all. Just probably less than an hour walk, just over the Mount of Olives. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Now, it was nearing the feast of Passover. All right? There were a lot of people from all over the known world at the time who were Jews who were in Jerusalem at the time. All right? Mary and Martha and Lazarus were very well known in the city of Jerusalem. They must have been, because many of the people of Jerusalem came to Martha and Mary's house to mourn with them. Now, it was customary at that time that if you had a death in your family, that people would come to your house and they would mourn with you for a lot of times at least a week. Depending on who the person was, sometimes it would be even longer. You know, but at least for a week, they would mourn for that person. They would go to their house, they would put on sackcloth and throw ashes on their head, and they would just rock back and forth and weep and cry and moan, just to show just to show support to the people who'd had somebody pass away, right? And this is what had happened. A lot of people came out of Jerusalem. A lot of people that knew Martha and Mary came out of Jerusalem to mourn with them. This was customary. This wasn't anything out of usual. All right. The verse 21 then says, "Then said Martha." No. Verse 20. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. She didn't even wait for him to get there, right? She went to meet him. But Mary sat still in the house. Okay? This is very in character for them, isn't it? Martha, the one who was up working in the other story, right? Who was always up doing something. I know enough, let me get about the work. When she heard Jesus was coming, she went running to meet him. Mary, the one who had sat at his feet, washed his feet and dried them with her hair, she stayed in the house just contemplating. All right? Sometimes it's good to contemplate, and sometimes it's good to get up and go do the work. You know what I mean? So Martha went running to meet him. Mary was still in the house. I'm sure she was very, very sad. And then in verse 21, then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Now, she wasn't saying this like, why the heck weren't you here? You know? She was saying, Jesus, I know you are who you say you are. If you'd have been here, this wouldn't have happened. She wasn't blaming him for not being there. She was just making a statement of faith. All right? That's all she was doing. In verse 22, this is very important. But I know that even now, Whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Now, she said that, and it sounds like she's expecting Jesus to raise her brother from the dead. But she still doesn't understand that what Jesus is there for. She still doesn't know that that's what he's going to do. Next, in verse 23, Jesus said unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Just like we say that about people when they pass away now. Right? We know, especially Christian people that we know, when we talk about them, we say, well, we know we'll see them again when we're all resurrected. You know what I mean? And we'll all see each other in heaven again, right? And that's all she's saying. Of course he'll rise again at the resurrection. You taught us that. I believe that. He trusted in you. He's done everything necessary for his salvation. I know he'll be resurrected. Jesus said unto her, verse 25, I am. You notice that? I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. At this time, that was the gospel. All right? If you believe in me, you will live. So he's repeating the gospel here. Verse 26, and whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believeth thou this? In other words, he's saying, do you believe what I just told you? Because he needed to know. He needed to know if she believed it or not. Okay? And when she had, let me see, verse 27, and she saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. Okay. She believed it. When Jesus told her who he was, she believed it. For the most part, the Jews didn't believe it. Okay? They didn't. As a group, they didn't. But she believed it. And because she believed it, she was saved. And Lazarus believed it. And he's going to be saved. And his sister Mary believed it. Verse 28, and when she had said so, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, The Master is come and calleth for thee. Notice that she went secretly to Mary. And the reason she did that is because Jesus wanted Mary to come to him privately so that he could teach her, so he could comfort her first, and then also teach her. But he did this in secret because it wasn't seen as a natural thing for a rabbi to teach a woman at that time. So it was kind of on the down low, right? Wasn't anything wrong with teaching a woman, but it was seen as wrong. Okay? That a rabbi didn't normally teach women. The way it worked was rabbis taught the men. Alright? And the men, especially husbands, were to teach their wives and their children. Okay? That's how it was supposed to work. It's still supposed to work that way. I mean, except that it's okay for women to be taught. And children too nowadays. By other people besides their parents. But that's just the way it worked back then. Okay? So he sent for her privately. Well, that didn't work. Verse 29 says, As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. Now Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in that place where Martha met him. So he was still on his way. The Jews then, which were with her in the house, with Mary in the house, and comforted her, when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out, followed her, saying, She goeth unto the grave to weep there. So, there went the secret meeting, right? Because all the people who were there in the house with her, mourning with her, they got up and they followed her. Now they thought she was going to the gravesite, but she was going to meet Jesus. Then, verse 32, Then when Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, She fell down at his feet. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Same thing. She's not getting on to him. She's making a statement of faith. Verse 33, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Jesus was upset. And in verse 34 it says, and said, where have ye laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Verse 35, Jesus wept. Jesus wept is one of the most famous verses in the Bible. When I was a little kid, between, say, 6 years old and 13 years old, in Sunday school, the Sunday school teacher, every once in a while, he'd say, quote a scripture, quote a verse of scripture. And the first guy up always said, Jesus wept. That was the go-to right there for teenage boys, right? Jesus wept. Everybody knew that one. You know what I mean? But this just goes to show that Jesus was just as much a man as he was God. He felt bad. He was sorrowful. All right? He was deeply moved over the death of his friend Lazarus. All right? He was deeply moved. Now, he goes on to say, then said the Jews, behold how he loved him. They saw him being upset, and they said, look how much Jesus loved him. He loved him so much that he's all upset and everything. Verse 37, and some of them said, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? In other words, they're saying the same thing. If you'd have been here, he might not have died. All right? We don't know that, but we think maybe if you'd been here, you makes people see. As a matter of fact, the last time he was in Jerusalem, the reason they got in trouble was because he healed a man from blindness, a guy who had been blind from birth. The last time he was in Jerusalem, that's what he had done, so that's what they refer to. Well, he makes the blind see. That was the very last thing they had seen in Jerusalem, him do. You know what I mean? And if he could make the blind see, maybe he could have healed this man. Not quite the statement of faith Martha and Mary made, but close. This is why Jesus went to do this, right? Because he wanted people to be sure. You know, in the book of John, John says, I'm writing this so that you will believe. All right? The whole book of John is so that you will believe. Okay? And that's why Jesus is doing this. So that these people wouldn't have questions anymore. That they would believe that he is who he says he is. Verse 38, Jesus therefore, again groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. That's how they buried people back then. They would hollow out a cave in the limestone, and then they'd put a rock in front of it to keep the smell from getting out. Jesus said, take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, the go-getter, Martha, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Now we all know that's true. Jesus said unto her, said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone. Taking away the stone was not just an exercise in getting the stone out of the way. He said take away the stone because he wanted to test their faith. If they rolled the stone away, then they believed that Jesus could do anything. If they didn't take the stone away, they didn't truly believe that Jesus could do anything. That he wasn't really who he said he was. All right? So he told them, take the stone away. And they did. I have a feeling that none of this would have happened if they hadn't. Although I believe Jesus probably would have just went up there and opened it himself and done it anyway. But what does he do? He goes back and he strengthens their faith again. Didn't I tell you? You know, if you believe it, you will see the glory of God. And that's what they're about to see. Then in verse 41, then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, not just Martha and Mary and the disciples, although it was for their benefit as well, but everybody who was standing by. Now you got to figure there was probably anywhere between 20, 30, maybe even 50 people there. Maybe even more than that. Okay? Who had come out to mourn with these people. Right? But it was for everybody who was standing there. It was for everybody's benefit. And you know that if he raised Lazarus from the dead, what was going to happen? These people were going to go back to Jerusalem and tell what they saw, aren't they? So I said that they may, he says, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. That's what he wants you to believe. Right? And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Now, we all watch movies about Jesus sometimes, and it's always amazing to me how in some of these movies, when Jesus does a miracle, it's like he's like this. Let me get enough power, you know, to do this. You know what I mean? Believe me, Jesus doesn't need to do that. Okay? He's not getting down on his knees and just, come on, get up. No, that's not how Jesus works. Okay? Jesus has control over all things. He made everything. Nothing was made that he didn't make. Right? Raising somebody from the dead is a small thing for Jesus.
Amen.
Alright? He just yells, and the only reason he yelled was so Lazarus would hear it, because he wasn't right at the door of the tomb. And so all the people around could hear what he was saying. Mm-hmm. Lazarus, come forth. Mm-hmm. He stood there like a man and said, Lazarus, come forth. Mm-hmm. He wasn't like, let me see if I can, no. Lazarus, come forth. Yes. So everybody could hear. Yes. You know? That's the only reason he's raised his voice. Because he wanted them to know what was going on. Verse 44. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. That's how you know he was truly dead. Okay? A lot of people would say, well, he wasn't really dead. He was just hiding in the tomb waiting for Jesus to come along. You know what I mean? Now, what you're thinking about is Pentecostal churches. What you're thinking about. That's what they do. You know what I mean? Or these evangelists that go around healing people all the time. And they bring somebody up that's in a wheelchair and say, be healed, and they get up and walk. Guess what? The people could walk all along. You know what I mean? They borrowed a wheelchair and rolled it up. Okay? Not saying that people can't be healed by Jesus, don't get me wrong. But that's not how he works today. Alright? In this time, that's how Jesus worked. You see, the Jews need a sign. They have to be convinced by signs and wonders. It's been that way since the beginning. Alright? So Jesus came doing signs and wonders and miracles so that they would believe. Okay? That's what this is all about. So Lazarus comes forth, had on his grave clothes, and a napkin over his face. And Jesus said unto them, loose him and let him go. So several people went up there and they took all these grave clothes off of him, right? So that he would be released. Right? And so he could walk around and say hi to everybody. Verse 45, then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did, believed on him. Well, that was what he went there to do, wasn't it? He didn't go to raise Lazarus from the dead. Guess what? Lazarus was going to die again and go back to the grave. Alright? He went there and rose Lazarus from the dead so that people would believe that he was who he said he was. That's what this story is all about. Do you believe that he is who he says he is? Alright? Do you believe that if you trust in the fact that he died for your sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried and he rose again the third day, do you trust in that for your salvation? Alright? Now, you may not. You may believe what you believe. Right? There's thousands of people out here who believe they must repent of their sins and be baptized if they're going to be saved. And you can't, and it doesn't matter how many times you tell them different, they're not going to believe it. They're going to go to Mark, they're going to go to the end of Mark, and they're going to read that and say, look, that's what Jesus said. Jesus said that. Well, that's not everything Jesus said. You know what I mean? That's not the end of the story. Okay? Today, we are saved by trusting in that gospel. By trusting in what Jesus has already done. And that is all that's required. Because Jesus already fulfilled all of the requirements for us. Right? The requirements have been fulfilled by Jesus. Do you believe he is who he says he is? Do you believe that what he did was enough to save you? Do you trust in that for your salvation? Because when you stand before Jesus, he's going to ask you, what do you trust in? Why should I let you in? All right? If you say, because I repented and was baptized, he's going to say, I never knew you. But if you say, because I trust in the finished work of Jesus Christ, you're in. Do you believe him or not? That's my message.